Chicago, perhaps Indiana Bears. We're going to start with the good news, is that's Caleb Williams, obviously not afraid at all of this daunting schedule. He was on the Kelsey Brothers podcast this week. By one metric, the Bears have the toughest schedule in the league. By others, they're around like 12 or 13th. So here's Caleb on the tough schedule he's facing this season.
We got a bunch of primetime games, and so-called the hardest schedule. We had the second hardest last year, so we're excited. We don't back down from no challenge.
Hell yeah,
and
man.
So
that's how you gotta be.
We want everybody to know that going to the playoffs and things like that is in our future, and in our present future and future coming up, and it's going to be a consistent thing for us. But obviously, we got to do the right things to put ourselves in those positions.
So that's the, good news. Your quarterback is confident. They open with the Panthers, the Vikings. It should be fine out of the gate. They do have to go to Buffalo. That's tough. They do have to go to Seattle. That's tough.
It seems to me the NFL gave them a very workable early schedule to build up the hype around the Bears. I think the Bears being good. I mean, I can tell you this, talking with our bosses for years, we were begging. When Chicago is good, when Philadelphia is good, it is really good for Fox. It's good for the NFC. There are certain organizations, the Niners out west, the Bears, the Giants, the Eagles. It's really there are certain teams. Leagues don't care. Networks do. The Bears being good, that's why, remember that last year when Ben Johnson took over? Didn't they play like Tennessee or somebody in their first game? It was like the league wanted Ben Johnson to get off to a good start. This feels like an intentionally lighter lift early to get all the hype up around a very good Bears team.
Yeah, Colin seems a bit off base right there, because that actually happened to be Caleb Williams' very first professional game, which was against Tennessee. And this connects directly to a point I've been making for quite some time now. I've been discussing this for years, I suppose, which feels like an odd thing to admit out loud. It revolves around how the media desperately wants Chicago to become a marquee franchise. That's the core of it. And as I mentioned before, a lot of this perspective came from some of the remarks Colin has made, because at the end of the day, ratings are simply ratings, and views are simply views. That's the reality. And that's precisely why I went on an extended tirade, I guess it must have been a couple of weeks ago by now, discussing what Caleb could potentially achieve with the Chicago Bears. I keep drawing comparisons to the Kansas City Chiefs of 2018, suggesting that the Bears' situation could end up being even more significant than the Chiefs, and even more significant than the Swift Mania level of attention. Just reflect on how popular and successful the Chiefs have become, and that's happening in Kansas City. If that same level of success were happening in Philadelphia, or in Chicago, it would be all over. Honestly, it would be completely game over. And this was painfully obvious to me even back in 2024, when the Bears were having a rough stretch, right? And when Caleb himself was struggling. We've already dissected those struggles and inferred some defense for why they happened, so we're not going to rehash that here and waste time. But it was unmistakably clear, in the conversations happening day after day, week after week, that I was seeing far more discussion focused on what was going wrong with Caleb and the Bears, rather than what was going right with Bo Nix in Denver or Jaden Daniels in Washington. And that discrepancy has always been a fascinating signal to me. And now, you have Caleb becoming somewhat, I don't want to use the word controversial. I wish we had a more precise term, but I think Caleb has the potential to evolve into a player who is, let's say, someone you love to dislike, in a way that I don't believe Patrick Mahomes really taps into. I genuinely don't. It's certain things Caleb says, the way he conducts himself, some of his sound bites, I believe they carry a bit more bite than Patrick Mahomes' public persona. Patrick Mahomes seems far more neutral in that regard. And that dynamic only continues to amplify the attention and the stakes, especially when you also factor in that Chicago is now in direct competition with the Detroit Lions, the Minnesota Vikings, and the Green Bay Packers. Those are also major brands, incredibly iconic franchises, with deep histories and a lot of rivalry intensity, in a way that, say, the Chiefs versus the Raiders just wasn't delivering. You could point to Chiefs-Broncos, but that hasn't been a real heated rivalry until essentially last season. Before it wasn't genuinely happening. Same with the Chargers. That's not the kind of path the Chicago Bears are on right now. So it's genuinely fascinating to consider what this whole scenario could bring. But before I go further, and I've already jumped into it quite a bit. Bears fans, please, please, please remember to subscribe and watch the full-length video. When you do that, the view counts go through the roof, subscribers go through the roof, and it's not about chasing those metrics for their own sake. It's about being able to create Chicago Bears content that people actually want to watch and discuss, so we can keep having the most unbiased, grounded, and honest conversations about this team. It truly makes a huge difference, and I really appreciate it. But yes, I'm genuinely annoyed by the whole schedule conversation. Because I'm sorry, I simply do not see this as the toughest schedule. I see nothing about this slate of games that qualifies as the toughest schedule. And that's why people say, oh, by one metric it's the hardest schedule, but by the next metric it's ranked 12th, 13th, or 14th, which would put it right around the middle of the league. And I just find that kind of irritating. I don't know when this obsession with schedule strength began. I know it's always been a talking point, strength of schedule, and oh, you're not beating any good teams, you're only beating bad teams or non-playoff teams. To a certain degree, I'm fine with that. I think it can be an interesting angle. I think it can be thought-provoking. And when we're in the middle of the season, just having interesting conversations, say it's a Wednesday, we've already broken down the previous games, and we're about to start discussing the upcoming Thursday, Friday, Saturday games, it might be interesting to ask, well, how has Caleb performed this season so far? Against playoff teams or teams with a winning record, his stats are this, compared to teams with a losing record, where his stats are that. And I do find that kind of analysis interesting, depending on how it's used, because sometimes I think it can be incredibly disingenuous and misapplied. And for me, the way we've been looking at strength of schedule lately, the whole idea, especially because we're seeing lists based on numbers like 0.5 and then another list with 0.489, those metrics are just too difficult to actually put any real faith in. You know when a guy throws 5 touchdown passes versus 15. You feel it, you sense it, you live it. You understand that contrast. You know when someone completes 70% of their passes versus 50%. You know what that looks like and feels like. You know it deeply. But strength of schedule? I just don't think it works the same way. Outside of those obvious cases, and this doesn't even hold up perfectly right now, because I'm thinking more about 2022 or 2023, when you had to play the Chiefs, the Eagles, the Bengals, the Ravens, the Bills, you just knew that schedule was brutal. But at this moment in time, I look at a schedule like Chicago's, and I just see, yes, there will be some competitive games, absolutely. But I also still see, and this is something I've talked about a lot, I feel pretty confident, pretty comfortable, and really optimistic when I look straight at this schedule. Almost every single team, except maybe the Bucs, seems to be moving in the right direction. And I like a lot of the decisions they've made. Even a random team like the New Orleans Saints, not just the obvious ones like the Patriots, Eagles, or Bills. But I don't know to what degree all of this actually materializes, right? I'm incredibly optimistic that the Eagles will be significantly better offensively than they were, but does that automatically mean that game becomes a brutal matchup for the Bears, which should then increase their toughest schedule metric? I don't know. Same thing when looking at the Patriots, or the Saints, or the Jaguars. Honestly, I just look at this schedule and, this is going to sound foolish, but I just see football games. I really do. I just see football games. And to me, that reflects the idea that the league as a whole has really evened out. I believe strongly in Josh Allen. In my personal view, he's the best quarterback in the NFL. Yet I don't look at the Bills and think, oh man, the Bears have to play Buffalo in Week 15, that's a brutal game. Once upon a time, facing the Bills, the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Bengals and healthy, that was an exhausting slate. You'd think, oh gosh, that's brutal. You're going up against greatness. You're facing a team firing on all cylinders. That's not really the case anymore. Even the teams that won the Super Bowl, or went to the Super Bowl last year, like the Seahawks and the Patriots, the Seahawks were clearly the best team and won it all. But they weren't an unstoppable juggernaut. They weren't a team you faced and thought, this is terrifying, I don't know how we'll beat them. That's not how I see today's teams. The closest we have to that is the Los Angeles Rams. And strength of schedule matters more when it's noticeably easier, when you're noticeably not playing the Josh Allens of the league. That can open things up. But for a schedule like this? It just doesn't land for me. Week 2 against either Kyler Murray or J.J. McCarthy, Is that supposed to scare you? Week 1 against Bryce Young and the Panthers. Again, I think they'll be competitive, and I'm excited to see what Carolina looks like. But when I evaluate strength of schedule, I look for fear. Don't try to be cool and say you shouldn't fear anyone, don't overthink the word. Just something that makes you a bit uncomfortable. And sure, the Panthers could be good next year, but that game doesn't make me uncomfortable. Neither does facing the Vikings. Neither does facing the Eagles. None of these teams make me uncomfortable. There was a healthy sense of discomfort going against teams in their absolute prime heyday, the Bills, Ravens, etc., where they could explode at any moment. That was a strong degree of unease. Even the Lions, when they had Ben Johnson and were firing on all cylinders, you thought, this team can run you out of the stadium. That was uncomfortable. I don't get that sense from any team except the Rams. And I still leave the door open for that not even being true, especially now that everyone's saying they're going to go undefeated. My mind immediately tells me, okay, then I don't think they'll be as great as everyone thinks. I'm not just being contrarian, it's fair to call them the best team, and I technically have more confidence in them, but I don't see them as unbeatable. I don't see them as unbeatable. And I also look at it this way, the Bears are a great team as well. So when you're looking at a competitor or a tough opponent, well, you're an equal then. You're equals. If you're not an equal, then strength of schedule matters much more to me. If you are an equal, then the weakness of the schedule can matter more, because that could be leveraged for the number 1 seed. I look at it through that lens. But if you're straight up equals, I don't look at a single one of these games and think, that's a game where I, as a huge Bears fan making all these videos, would say the Bears will win all of them, they'll be great, but then week 8 comes and I say, this one's tough, it's okay if you lose. There's no room for that FO. Army. And if anything, it'll largely come down to what the division looks like. Is Kyler Murray actually awesome with the Vikings? Is JJ McCarthy actually awesome? Is he the starter in Minnesota? I don't know, and neither do you. Green Bay, Jordan Love, right? Michael Parsons is back? What's the story there? Who's their running back? They're dealing with some of that stuff. Detroit's offense was great even last year, and we saw the divisional games with the Bears and everyone else in the NFC. We saw how those unfolded. We know they're really competitive regardless of the situation or who the quarterback is. Those games are the perfect definition of true divisional matchups. So I think that reality does a lot more heavy lifting than anything else. But yeah, I don't know. Not many people are confident the Panthers will be a great team. Not many are confident the Eagles will be great. Not many are confident the Falcons will be great. No one has strong convictions. I guess some still believe Seattle will be really good, but it doesn't feel like people think they'll be as good this year as last. I don't know who's putting all their eggs in the basket of the Bucs or the Saints. A lot of people think the Jaguars could take a step backward. People think the Dolphins are still a joke. The Bills will be competitive as usual. And then you're back to the division. So I'm just not largely seeing it. I accidentally skipped the Patriots. Many people were saying the Patriots might not and make the playoffs this year, and that was before A.J. Brown, so I'm sure that helped. But people don't have strong feelings. A lot of people, speaking of schedule, said the Patriots were fool's gold specifically because of their soft schedule. Now they have a harder schedule, so they won't be as good. Therefore, one of the teams that will be harder for them to beat is, lo and behold, the Chicago Bears. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of got on my soapbox about strength of schedule, but I just don't know. They even asked Caleb, and Caleb said, we don't back down, and Kelly said, yeah, that's the attitude. And I'm like, what are we even talking about? What is Caleb supposed to say? Oh man, this schedule, geez, this is a tough one? Then Colin says, I think they're giving Chicago an easier schedule so they can get situated and have success for the ratings. And I'm just like, I think we're getting further away from talking about things that matter. That's why I went on this whole rant. But those are just my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours. What do you all think about the Bears' strength of schedule? Do you honestly look at that schedule and think, oh gee whiz, we have the hardest slate in the NFL? And here's what's annoying, the last thing I'll say, especially when the Bears are winning, it'll be, yeah, we're winning and we have the hardest schedule. And I'm like, I can still think you're a great team, I can still pump you up and believe in everything you do. but we don't have to pretend this is an incredibly hard, brutal gauntlet. I think we're just adding more noise into the signal. So let me know your thoughts. I read every single comment, whether you agree or disagree. Let's get into discussions, let's get into fights. But ultimately, let's have fun. Please consider subscribing, we're building an amazing community here, and I'd love to see you be part of it. I want to build something we all feel connected to, something we're excited to be part of. We're well on our way. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, it really helps with visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.